I'm Caitlin Moore, and I'm the lead foster care specialist here at Christian Heritage, and today we're going to be talking about RPPS, which stands for Reasonable and Prudent Parenting Standards. This training was asked of the department to give to all of our foster parents to understand how to make the lives of our foster kids a little more normal. So we're just going to go through the training. So the introduction to RPPS. The purpose is to provide foster youth with the least restrictive and most normal family experience and care. The goal of the department is to allow the foster children to have a very normal family life when they're placed in foster care, rather than how it has been in the past, where they feel like they have foster child written all over their forehead and they don't get to do the same things as their foster siblings. So this training and these new rules allow the foster kids to do so. The requirements of RPPS. RPPS only addresses 4 key activities, which we'll go over individually: extracurricular, enrichment, cultural, and social activities. You're going to learn how to say no, because no is normal also. Foster parents must use RPPS correctly, and we're going to encourage you not to make decisions in a vacuum. You have a team, and we're going to teach you to utilize that team to make decisions. There are a number of factors to consider when making RPPS decisions. RPPS is not an all or nothing approach towards decision making, and RPPS does not apply to probation youth as their parents maintain parental rights. So this does not apply to our probation children. It would apply if they're probation and state boards. The federal definition of RPPS, I'll read this and then I will narrow it down to the part of it that actually makes sense. So the standard characterized by careful and sensible parental decisions that maintain the health and safety and best interests of the child, while at the same time encouraging the emotional and developmental growth of the child, that a caregiver shall use when determining whether to allow a child in foster care under the responsibility of the state to participate in extracurricular, enrichment, cultural, and social activities. So the main part of this that we're going to go over and what this really means is, starting here, that a caregiver shall use when determining whether to allow a child in foster care under the responsibility of the state to participate in extracurricular, enrichment, cultural, and social activities. If they're state wards, then this is what it's talking about. It's only state wards, but it's allowing you as a foster parent to get them involved in extracurricular activities. So a caregiver, as defined by the federal government, is a foster parent with whom a child in foster care has been placed with, or designated official for a child care institution in which the child in foster care has been placed. So this means a foster parent or a group home, but we're just going to be talking about foster parents today. When considering RPPS standards, we have to consider their age, not just their developmental age, but their cognitive age. Just because they're 16 doesn't mean that they function on a 16-year-old level. So all of the activities that we're putting our kids in, whether it's extracurricular, enrichment, and cultural activities, we have to consider what they can handle on a cognitive level, not just their developmental age. So what this says is activities are items that are generally accepted as suitable for children of the same chronological age or level of maturity, or that are determined to be developmentally appropriate for a child. So their chronological age could be 16, and you may have a 16-year-old biological child, but your biological child may function on a way different level than the foster child. And so this is having you consider what is appropriate for their developmental age, not just their chronological age. If a child of the same age or maturity can participate in an activity, the foster youth should be allowed to as well. So if your 16-year-old foster child functions at a 16-year-old level, they're able to do well in school, they're able to take direction, anything that a 16-year-old is able to handle maturity-wise, then they should be able to do activities that reflect their ability to handle that. For example, driver's ed. If the 16-year-old is doing well, can take directions, stays out of trouble, and you would allow your biological child to do driver's ed, then this could be an option for the foster child. If a foster youth has a different developmental age than chronological age, the developmental age should be used to determine the appropriateness of the activity. So RPPS covers the developmental age of the child more than the chronological age. So you may have a 16-year-old that functions at a 12-year-old level, and that's deemed by their level of abilities in school. Maybe they have a diagnosis, and so you wouldn't want them going to driver's ed at a 12-year-old cognitive level when they're really 16. So an extracurricular activity defined is activities that can be attended by the students in school, but that are not a part of the regular scheduled classes. So our examples are sports, field trips, band, orchestra, choir, art club, FBLA, or FFA. So these extracurriculars are usually deemed by what they're involved with at school, and they can now get involved in those. You would be allowed to sign the permission slip for the child to go on the field trip, but as we'll learn later, you definitely want to let your team know that they're getting involved in those activities. An enrichment activity is an activity making a childhood experience fuller or more meaningful or rewarding. So our examples would be volunteering, employment, or driver's education. So just things that they want to get involved with that would enrich their strengths and enrich their environment. A cultural activity is activity relating to a particular group of people and their habits, beliefs, traditions, or relating to the fine arts. So examples would be festivals, powwows, or church groups. So youth groups, the kiddos can now attend. They have been in the past, but now they're definitely able to attend for church camps and different church activities that may go on during the week. Social activities defined as social gathering or party, especially of or as given by an organized groups. So our dances, proms, social media, movies, sleepovers. This is the big one that's highlighted in foster care because so many of our children have been left out of activities with friends because in the past we have had to background check the parents, and now we don't have to do that, but we're going to learn how to make those decisions appropriately and not in a vacuum. So clarification point, an activity versus service. RPPS is related to activities that the child or youth participates in. It is not related to a service that is provided for the youth or foster parents. So this example would be if there's a training going on that you as a foster parent would like to attend and there may be childcare available. They would not be able to be left with the childcare without a background check being done on the person involved or that is supervising. Because the activity is aimed at you as a foster parent and not the child could not attend without the old rules of the background check. Now, if it's an activity for the child that's deemed for the child, that would be covered by the extracurricular or enrichment, then they absolutely can attend. The examples given for this is sports, church camp, overnights. This does not cover respite or childcare. Respite is still under the same rules that the family that they're going to needs to be background checked ahead of time, and a walkthrough needs to be done of their home. So respite is not covered by RPPS. The goal of this is to promote and support normalcy. This establishes a youth's right to access and participate in activities. Establishes an obligation for a child welfare agency to promote a child's access to and participation in age and developmentally appropriate activities, and empowers caregivers to permit access to activities as a reasonable and prudent parent would. So this would allow the child to just get involved in age-appropriate activities, which would enrich their lives and provide more normalcy, as a biological child would in the same foster home. So no is normal too. As a parent, you can say no to your child under any circumstance. Just because the child can do it doesn't mean that they should do it. And RPPS allows you to say no. If the child comes to you and says, I want to go to prom tomorrow night, and that wasn't enough time given to prepare, you are allowed to say no, and your agency will completely support you in that decision. There is an art and responsibility in saying no as well, when it is determined that it is not in the child's best interest to participate. A no answer can be reasonable and prudent parenting as well. So again, if the child is asking for something that you normally wouldn't allow your biological child to do, or maybe you have house rules about giving enough notice, whatever that may be within your household, you can say no to them. It's not an all or nothing approach where just because they can, they should. Factors to consider when making an RPPS decision. The child's age and maturity and development. We've talked about this, that their abilities, not just their chronological age, should be considered. If they function at a lower age level, then that's what should be considered when deciding whether they should be involved in an activity or not. Potential risk and appropriateness of the activity, again, that really ties back to their maturity level and what they're able to do. The best interest of the child, if they're asking to do something or get involved in an activity that really wouldn't be in their best interest, then it is okay to say no in that case. Importance of encouraging the child's emotional and developmental growth. It's so important to get our kids involved in extracurriculars, especially if it's a strength of theirs. So if your child is really good at art, we definitely want them to go to an art class. If they're really good at sports or they're a little more hyper at home, it is best to get them involved in a sport because that is in their best interest and it will definitely help their development and their emotional maturity. The importance of providing the child with the least restrictive and most family life experience possible. We've just run into situations in foster care where the foster child is unable to do a lot of the things that they want to do, but the biological family is allowed to do different things. And so our foster kids are ending up staying home and doing nothing when they could be out playing sports or at a friend's house and just being normal kids. And that's really what this is promoting, just the normalcy. So if they're placed in your home and your biological children are getting involved elsewhere, have the foster child get involved also. Benefits of pursuing interests, self-identity, healthy risk-taking, and gaining skills as they transition into adulthood. This is definitely important for our teenagers to get involved in just pursuing their interests. It builds up their identity and who they are, where their strengths are, and it's super important that they're learning transitional living skills also. And so sometimes that is healthy risk-taking. Sometimes it is getting a job and maybe they're let go because of different skills they lack. It's a learning opportunity, it's a teaching opportunity. So that's super important for our kids to get involved with as they age. Cultural and ethnicity of the child and input from biological parents. We definitely want what input whenever we can from the biological family, especially when it comes to cultural identity. The department is very pushy when it comes to cultural identity and getting involved in their cultural activities. So it could be a powwow at the Indian Center or a festival for just different ethnicities. So it's super important that we find those things, and it always has been encouraged of the foster families to get them involved in that way. The desire of the children, if they want to get involved, and there's no reason not to, if they can handle it maturity-wise, developmentally-wise, and cognitively, let's get them involved. Let's get them out interacting socially, learning social skills, and learning skills of their own. An RPPS decision must be individualized by the child. If we have sibling strips, each child is going to have different skills and different developmental skills and different abilities, and so each of our decisions have to be based off what the child can do, not just what the family as a whole can do. Licensing liability. There has been questions posed of if the child is injured, will you lose your license if you're making an RPPS decision, or will there be consequences to your license? And the answer is no. If you're making an RPPS decision and you're doing it appropriately and getting the team involved, and something were to happen, say on the football field, you allow them to be on a football team and they break their arm. Even though this was an RPPS decision, it was in their best interest, and accidents happen, so you will not be held liable for that accident. If you are not making decisions appropriately with RPPS and something were to happen, then yes, they can take some action against your license, and that's why we ask that you don't make decisions in a vacuum, that you have the team involved and everybody supports you in your decision. RPPS decision making. Know the youth, know their abilities, know their interests, know if they're able to do what they're asking to do or what you want to get them involved with. Don't make decisions in a vacuum. Consult your Christian Heritage foster care specialist, caseworker, therapist, birth parent if appropriate. Get the team involved. Even though a field trip on Friday may sound like a good idea, let your foster care specialist know, let the caseworker know, so that in case something were to happen, everybody knows where the child is. Plus, if it's not in their best interest, somebody can speak up and say so. Sometimes no is normal. If you are saying no to an activity or anything that would be covered by RPPS and you're deciding to say no, your foster care specialist and the caseworker will support you, because we don't always get to do what we want and everything that we want, and just like you would say no to your biological child, we expect you to say no to the foster child also. Document decisions. Keep your Christian Heritage Foster Care Specialist and HHS worker informed. Even if it's just an email, definitely let them know what's going on. Not an all or nothing approach. Conditional, yes. Allow to attend part of an event, must be approved, must have an approved adult to go with as well. An example of this would be maybe the foster child has met a new friend at school and they have trouble making friends, but the friend has invited kiddo over for a slumber party on Friday night. You don't know who this child is and you don't know their parents, but you have their contact information and maybe you've spoken to the parent over the phone. Instead of sending the child over for the full overnight, maybe you negotiate that they can go over until 10 o'clock at night, giving them the opportunity to socialize and be a part of this friendship, but maybe the next step, another week, would be the overnight. But we're just weaning our way into more and more of a friendship with this kiddo. We don't want to just do everything that the child is asking. We can be limited on what those decisions look like. Prom also, if it gets over at midnight, maybe you're not comfortable with that time and you have the child come home at 10 o'clock. We'll support you in those decisions. Giving them the opportunity to still socialize and be a part of the extracurricular, but maybe on a limited basis just because of the needs of the child. And last but not least, when in doubt, make the call. Make the call to your foster care specialist or your caseworker to see if the activity that the kiddo wants to get involved with would be appropriate. Faith-based expectations. Christian Heritage is a faith-based agency, and the department knows that. And when they place a child within a foster care home with Christian Heritage, they know that the kid is likely going to church. And we would strongly encourage you to take your foster kiddo to church. This allows you to take them to church, to take them to youth group, to drop them off, and let them be a part of that activity. There's no limitations to what you can do, except if the biological parent does not want the child involved in your faith or practice. Then we'll make accommodations for the child to be on a visit or to do something else during that time that you're at church. But the expectation is that at placement, the legal guardians, which is the department, knows that the child will be attending church and church functions with you. This does not change with RPPS, the expectations of a faith-based agency. So in your training, you would have learned that you can take the child to church and there's no problem with that. The one thing we ask though, if the kiddo practices another faith, that we make accommodations for that. So say you go to a Presbyterian church, but the kiddo recognizes that he is Catholic. We want to make accommodations for that. And so now with our PPS, if they're age appropriate, if they can handle it developmentally, you can actually take the child to the Catholic church, drop them off, go to your church, and then pick them up later. This is definitely a decision that you want to make with your caseworker and the team, just in case somebody feels differently about this. But if visits can't be had on a Sunday morning and you want to take the child to their church, which we strongly encourage you to do, you are able to do that now under our PPS standards. That is all we have. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask your foster care specialist. Thank you.